She was humming while slicing peaches. That's what I remember most. The humming. Some off-key pop song she never liked until recently. She was barefoot, in a t-shirt that wasn't mine, slicing fruit like it was any other morning, and not the exact moment I realized my marriage had expired. I stood behind her for maybe a minute, watching her shoulders move slightly with the rhythm. She didn't know I'd come home early. She didn't hear me close the door. She didn't hear anything, really, except herself. And then her phone buzzed. Just once. But it was enough. She reached for it with the kind of speed you don't use unless you're hiding something. She didn't look back. Just tapped the screen, silenced it, kept humming. I stepped forward. I switched shifts with Caleb, I said. My voice was flat. It didn't even sound like mine. She paused, just for a beat. Then she smiled, without turning, and said, "Good. You need more sleep anyway." I didn't answer. I was looking at the knife in her hand. Not because I felt threatened, but because I couldn't stop thinking how sharp it looked against the soft orange of the fruit. Her phone lit up again, and that's when she said it. Still not looking at me, still slicing, as if it were just casual conversation. "Are you jealous?" I think something cracked in me then. Something too quiet to make a noise. Something that had been holding a lot together. "No," I said. "Just done." The knife stopped. The humming stopped. She turned, slowly, like she was trying to measure how serious I was. And in that silence, something strange happened. She smiled again. A different kind of smile. And I swear to God, I knew. I knew that wasn't the first time she'd heard that sentence. Just the first time from me. You want to know what happened next? I walked out the front door. And 3 hours later, I was staring at a receipt in our shared cloud folder for a hotel I'd never been to booked under her maiden name from 3 weekends ago, in a city we never visited together. And that was only the first breadcrumb. What came after? I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't lived it. I'd never looked at our shared cloud account before. Honestly, I forgot it existed. We made it back when we planned our wedding budget, some Google folder with spreadsheets we both pretended to care about. But when I opened it that afternoon, just to check if I was losing my mind, there it was. A PDF invoice. One of those generic hotel receipts with overly polite formatting. 3 nights. A suite. 2 breakfasts. Champagne upgrade. And at the top, her maiden name in bold letters, like a slap across the face. Maren hadn't used her maiden name in years. Not for online orders, not for travel, not for anything. I asked her once if she still identified with it, and she said, no, that girl was someone else. Apparently not. I stared at the check-in date, a Friday. That same Friday, she told me her department was having a burnout retreat, and she'd be staying at a coworker's place for early morning seminars. I remembered the night clearly because I'd made soup. Pathetic, I know. I made soup and texted her a picture of it because I was proud of how the egg swirl came out, and she replied with a thumbs up. A goddamn emoji. While she was drinking hotel champagne with someone under her old name. I should have stopped there. But I didn't. There were more files. More receipts. One for a dinner at a place called Juniper House, a dim-lit, $200 a plate kind of restaurant that doesn't even show prices on the menu. I only recognized it because she once told me it was too stuffy when I suggested it for our anniversary 2 years ago. Next, a pair of concert tickets. Row 3. Not a band we liked. Not one she'd ever mentioned. But she went. With someone. Not me. And the worst part? She used our joint credit card for the ride back home. That broke something I can't describe. Not the betrayal, not even the lies. It was the casualness. Like I wasn't even a variable in the equation. Like our entire life was just set decoration while she lived some parallel story offstage. I don't know how long I sat there, scrolling through files I'd never seen, my face hot and my hands shaking. The dog, Chewy, came up and put his chin on my knee. I didn't even notice him until I felt his weight. It was the most honest contact I'd had all week. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't say a word when she came home and tossed her bag like everything was fine. She took a long shower, left the towel on the floor, and climbed into bed. I lay next to her, eyes open, listening to her breathe, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it all, that there had to be an explanation, that it was a misunderstanding, a booking error, a dinner with friends, a concert her cousin dragged her to, something. But then her phone lit up again, and the name that appeared, Theo, wasn't saved with a last name. Just Theo Fallen Leaf, with a leaf emoji. She didn't even wake up, just smiled in her sleep and rolled over. And that's when I knew I wasn't sleeping next to a stranger. I was sleeping next to an actor, and I had no idea how long I'd been in her audience. I wasn't planning to. I really wasn't. But the thing about seeing a name appear over and over, always late at night, always with the kind of emoji that feels more intimate than a kiss, is that it starts to rot your insides. It eats at you. You begin to imagine voices, faces, scenes. So when her phone buzzed again at 3:47 a.m., with her snoring beside me, one hand carelessly draped across my chest like I was a pillow, not a person, I took it. I didn't unlock it. I didn't need to. The preview read, "Last night was dangerous winking face. From Theo Fallen Leaf." That was it. Just 5 words and an emoji. But my whole chest went hollow. I got out of bed as quietly as I could, stepped into the hallway, sat on the stairs in the dark. My knees were shaking like I'd run 5 miles, but all I'd done was walk away from a woman who used to cry when I left for business trips. And I don't know what came over me. Maybe I needed to feel like I had control over something, anything, but I took out my own phone and typed, "Hey, who is this?" I waited maybe 2 minutes before the 3 little dots popped up. Haha, very funny. Should I delete the pics? Pics. My throat went dry. I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen, waiting. Seconds passed. Then, "Relax, I didn't show your face." I could barely breathe. My hands were cold. My brain was doing this weird thing where it tried to convince me it wasn't happening, that I had misunderstood, that he thought I was someone else, that maybe it was some private joke between friends. But then he sent it. A photo. And in it was my wife, Maren, in the same outfit she wore to that burnout retreat, sitting on the edge of a hotel bed, half laughing, holding a bottle of wine. Her head tilted, her knees tucked, her expression completely different from the woman who tells me she's too tired for date night. She looked 17 again, reckless, alive. I stared at it for a long time, long enough that the screen dimmed and locked. That was when I realized I wasn't just betrayed, I was irrelevant. I wasn't part of her story anymore. Just a name on the lease, a body in the bed, a ghost floating between receipts and rituals she didn't care about. And still, I didn't wake her. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. I wanted to scream, throw the phone, wake her up and demand the truth like a man in a movie. But I didn't. I sat there, shaking, staring at the glow of my phone in the dark until the sun started leaking through the blinds. When she finally walked into the kitchen, hair messy, yawning, wearing my hoodie, she asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes, and I smiled. Because that's what you do when you're about to burn down your entire life without anyone noticing. The next morning, I watched her pour coffee into my favorite mug, the chipped one with the faded constellation pattern she once said looked like a sky full of regrets. Ironic now, she added 2 sugars, no cream, just the way I take it. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't spent the night dreaming next to me while some guy named Theo sent her messages about danger. She slid the mug across the counter, kissed my temple, and said, "You've been quiet lately. Is everything okay?" I almost laughed. Instead, I just nodded and said I was tired. She leaned against the counter, barefoot again, arms crossed. "You're not mad about dinner last night, are you?" I blinked. "What dinner?" She tilted her head like she was confused. "I told you. I had to meet Eliza for that thing. You said it was fine. Remember?" "No, I didn't. Because she didn't tell me. Because Eliza had moved to Denver last spring, and we hadn't seen her since." I stared at her, searching her face for a twitch, a crack, anything that would show she was bluffing. But she was good. Too good. She even added, "You were in the shower. Maybe you didn't hear me." It was so casual, so precise, like she'd practiced it. Like this wasn't her first lie, just the first one I'd caught mid-performance. I sipped the coffee and nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe." She smiled again. That same soft, practiced smile that used to make me feel chosen. Now it just made me feel managed. Later that day, while she was at work, I called Eliza. We weren't close. She was one of Maren's college friends who used to come around for brunch and birthdays before drifting off into a new city and new life. She sounded surprised to hear from me. Her voice was warm, but cautious. "Hey, sorry to bother you." I started, trying not to sound like a complete lunatic. "Maren said you were in town yesterday? I just forgot to ask how it went." A long pause. "I haven't been in your city since. God, New Year's maybe?" She said slowly. "Did something happen?" "No," I lied. "Just trying to keep my days straight." We hung up politely. She didn't press. But I knew she would text Marin. I was counting on it. When Marin came home that evening, she was different. Too cheerful. Too deliberate. She brought takeout from my favorite Thai place. The one she always said was too oily, and a six-pack of the craft beer she used to roll her eyes at. I watched her set the table, light a candle, ask how my day was like we were on some kind of sitcom date. And then she said, carefully, "So I heard Eliza called you today." I didn't answer. She sat down, pushed a container toward me, and smiled again. She was a little confused. I told her I must have misspoken, that I meant Claire, not her. You know how names get mixed up when you're tired. Claire. Another ghost. Another alibi. She was layering lies now, spackling over the cracks with soft tones and takeout. She was rebuilding the house while I was already halfway out the door in my mind, packing up pieces of the truth in silence. And still, I said nothing. Because I wasn't ready yet. Not to leave. Not to explode. Not until I knew exactly what she was hiding. And I was getting close. Because while she thought she was in control, while she thought she was fooling me, what she didn't know was that I had just installed a keystroke logger on our shared laptop. And the last time she used it, she forgot to clear the autofill. I didn't expect much from the keystroke logger. At first, it was more of a desperate move, something to make me feel like I still had a grip on the wheel, even if the car had already veered off the road. I installed it one night while she was in the shower, syncing it to my phone, and then wiped all traces from the system. I wasn't proud of it, but pride doesn't matter when you're drowning. For days, there was nothing. A few email logins. A search for low-light foundation for olive skin. A Pinterest board of kitchen remodels that made me feel stupid for hoping. And then, on a Wednesday morning, I got a ping. She had logged into a secondary email, one I didn't recognize. The username was a mix of letters and numbers, meaningless unless you were looking for a shadow. I cracked the password in under 20 minutes. It was our old dog's name followed by our wedding date. A combination she'd once used for everything. I guess she never thought I'd remember. The inbox was full. Not just messages from Theo, although there were plenty, but from others too. Names I didn't know. Conversations that read like love letters and therapy sessions and erotic fiction all at once. Some messages were short. Can't stop thinking about Saturday. Others were novels. Pages and pages about how hard it is to be seen in your own marriage. How she felt like a coat rack for other people's needs. How she wished she could live without shame. How she dreamed of being untethered. One line stopped my breath completely. He still thinks I'm his. But I don't even think I'm me anymore. It was dated 2 months ago. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat at the kitchen table, laptop glowing, watching my version of her fall apart in front of me. She wasn't just having an affair. She was running a parallel life. A mirror world where she got to be bold, cruel, alive, selfish, and where I was just a character she described as safe, but fading. There were photos too, not explicit, but worse in their intimacy. A picture of her hand holding someone else's, not Theo's, at a museum I once asked to visit on our anniversary. She told me it was too far, too expensive. Another photo of her in a hotel mirror, wearing a necklace I'd never seen, captioned, "This is who I really am." I backed out of the inbox slowly, my hands ice cold. I sat there until she came home. She looked tired, worn down, a little irritated, like the world had been unkind again. She asked if we could skip dinner, said she had a headache, and went straight to bed. I followed an hour later and lay beside her in the dark. I could hear her breathing, steady and real. I watched the ceiling and wondered, had she ever meant any of it? Were the good years even real? Or had I been a placeholder for something braver she hadn't had the courage to chase yet? I thought of the museum, the hand, the necklace, and that line again, echoing louder than anything. I don't even think I'm me anymore. She wasn't cheating because she stopped loving me. She was cheating because she didn't want to be her. And I was the last thread tying her to the version of herself she was trying to escape. I didn't sleep much after discovering that inbox. Maybe 2 hours at most. My mind kept replaying that sentence. He still thinks I'm his. I tried to remember the last time we even touched without it feeling scripted. Everything she'd said and done over the past year began rearranging itself in my memory like puzzle pieces that never belonged together. The next evening, she came home early. That alone was suspicious. She was in one of her homebody moods, she said, and wanted to take a bath and make dinner. I watched her from the hallway as she filled the tub with that overpriced lavender foam I always hated. not because it smelled bad, but because it felt like a performance. Like she was trying to look peaceful more than feel it. After dinner, she poured herself a second glass of wine and wandered into the guest room with her laptop. Said she needed to wrap up a few things. I waited a few minutes, then walked past the door. It was cracked open just enough to catch a glimpse of her screen. Zoom call. No camera. Just her voice and someone else's, slightly muffled. She didn't hear me stop. I couldn't help it. I stood there, quiet, almost breathless, listening. I can't keep living in this split, she said. Her voice was low, but clear. It's exhausting pretending to be one thing in this house and someone else when I'm actually alive. The person on the other end, a woman, hummed in sympathy. Have you thought about telling him? About leaving? Silence. Then, I don't think he'd survive it. And then she laughed. Not cruelly, not mockingly, but with a strange kind of pity. Like I was some antique she didn't want to throw out because she remembered what it used to mean. She continued, he's not a bad man. He's just wallpaper. He fades into the background. And when you're trying to become something brighter, he makes the whole room feel dim. Wallpaper. That one word did more damage than anything Theo had ever texted her. I backed away from the door before I heard the rest. I couldn't take it. I didn't want to hear her describe me like some faded design choice. A quiet thing that only becomes noticeable once you decide it's time for renovation. I went to the garage. I sat in the car, in the dark, and thought about what I was supposed to do. Blow up our life, call her out, demand answers I already knew would be lies. But I didn't do any of that. Instead, I did something worse. I made a copy of the inbox. All of it. Emails, photos, dates, details. I compiled it into a single encrypted file and uploaded it to a hidden folder I'd named after an old software project she never cared to understand. I backed it up to 2 USBs and buried them in different places around the house. Why? Because I knew something now. This wasn't going to end with shouting. It was going to end quietly, softly, the same way she'd been erasing me. But before I disappeared completely, I wanted her to know something. I was never wallpaper. I was the foundation. And she'd been building her little fantasy on top of cracks she refused to see. I didn't plan to change anything, not outwardly. I wasn't trying to provoke her or start some dramatic unraveling. I just stopped hiding that I was watching. Not in a loud way. In a way only she would notice. I started coming home earlier. Not every day, just enough to make her second guess her schedule. I made dinner before she got the chance to pretend she had plans. I sat in the living room without my phone, just waiting, reading the same page of a book for over an hour while she walked in and saw me. Really saw me, for the first time in months. At first, she didn't react. She smiled, kissed my forehead, asked about my day with rehearsed warmth. But the longer I kept up this quiet stillness, the more her edges frayed. She started stalling in the driveway before coming inside. I watched her through the blinds. Always in the car for a few minutes, sometimes on the phone, sometimes just staring ahead. Gathering herself. Then she started checking my phone. Sloppily. She'd wait until I was in the shower, then open it just enough to scan messages, swipe through tabs. She didn't find anything, of course. I'd made sure of that. But she was nervous. The same woman who used to drift through this house like she owned the air was now jumpy. Clumsy. Forgetting little lies she'd told the day before. I kept acting normal. Same routines. Same quiet husband. But now I'd watch her with intent. And she could feel it. One night, we sat on the couch watching a movie, some crime drama she picked because it was trending. She laughed at the wrong moments. Kept looking at me out of the corner of her eye. And when the protagonist confronted his cheating wife in the third act, she froze completely. The silence between us was louder than the television. I didn't look at her. I just said, "That's a hell of a scene." And she got up, mid-movie, claiming she was too tired to finish. The next morning, she asked me, casually, as she buttered toast, "Is everything okay with us?" I shrugged. "Shouldn't it be?" She hesitated. "You've been different lately." I met her gaze then, held it just long enough to watch her squirm. Maybe I just stopped being wallpaper. She didn't respond. She just stared, her mouth slightly open like she was waiting for the punchline. But I didn't give her one. I stood up, took my coffee, and left the room. That day, I changed all the passwords to our joint accounts. Bank, utilities, cloud. I didn't lock her out, not fully. I just changed things enough that she'd have to come to me if she wanted access. A subtle reminder that I was still here. that I wasn't a ghost drifting in the background anymore. She noticed that night. I saw her try to log into our financial app while pretending to scroll social media. Her screen blinked. Access denied. She didn't say anything, but I saw her hands tremble for just a second. She was losing her grip, and I wasn't even pulling. I was just standing still. And that, somehow, was the loudest thing I'd ever done. It happened on a Sunday. Of all days, a Sunday. The kind of day we used to treasure. Pancakes, laundry, rainy movies. I remember once she said Sundays were the most intimate kind of loneliness, because the world slowed down just enough to make you notice who you were sitting next to. That morning, she sat across from me at the kitchen table in silence. No makeup, hair tied in that messy bun that used to make her look like someone I'd chase across a crowded street. She looked exhausted, not from lack of sleep, but from pretending. And I didn't feel hate. Not anymore. Just distance. The kind you don't recover from. She stirred her coffee 3 full turns, then looked up at me and said, "I don't think I can do this anymore." I nodded. "I know." She blinked. That's not the response she expected. Maybe she thought I'd beg, or break, or ask why. But the truth was, I'd already left. Quietly. Over the past few weeks, I'd packed the emotional furniture, unscrewed the attachments, unlaced the grief. She was just catching up. "I thought you'd be angry," she whispered. I said. Then I realized something. She waited. I took a breath. "You weren't trying to hurt me. You were just trying to find yourself, and I happened to be standing in the way." She covered her mouth. Not crying. Not apologizing. Just processing. I could see it. The guilt, the confusion, the tiny ember of relief. Like someone finally cracked a window in a smoky room. "I'm sorry," she said, but it came out soft and flat. "I know." She reached for my hand across the table. And this time, I didn't pull away. But I didn't hold on, either. We sat there for a while. Not as lovers. Not even as friends. Just 2 people who shared a story that had run out of pages. By the end of the week, she moved out. No screaming. No scene. Just boxes, quiet instructions, awkward logistics. She left the key in the bowl by the door, the way I used to leave mine when I came home late from work. That night, the house felt different. Not empty, lighter. I made myself dinner. Burned the rice. Laughed about it. Played music she always turned off. Opened a window. Let the cold in. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I slept. Like really slept. And in the morning, I woke up to sunlight I hadn't noticed before. Maybe I'm not built for revenge. Maybe I'm not the guy who gets even, or burns the world down to make a point. I'm the guy who survives. Quietly. Softly. Fully. She asked me once if I was jealous. The truth? I wasn't jealous. I was grieving. But now, I'm finally free.